Stanford University.
Welcome to Stanford Medicine's 12th Annual Contemplation by Design Summit. I'm Dr. Tia Rich, founder and director of Contemplation by Design. It's my honor to introduce our next teacher, Anushka Fernandopulle, who will be giving a keynote titled Mindfulness and Leadership, the Path of Practice. Anushka Fernandopulle is a Buddhist teacher in the Insight meditation lineage who brings ancient teachings to modern life through leadership coaching, consulting, and retreat teaching around the world. Anushka's work is informed by a BA in anthropology and religion from Harvard University, an MBA from Yale School of Management, and serving as a core teacher at Spirit Rock Meditation Center in Marin County, California. Anushka lives in San Francisco and enjoys nature, creative arts, political engagement, sports, and modern urban life. Join me now in warmly welcoming Anushka.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here with you, and thank you for that nice introduction. I'm speaking to you from San Francisco, where I live, and I'm happy to get to talk with you about mindfulness and leadership, the path of practice. Some of you may have been attending some of the previous sessions that I believe were done by a variety of excellent teachers, including some of my colleagues, Joseph Goldstein, who was a teacher of mine, my colleague Will Kabat-Zinn, and I see that coming up also some Dharma friends, Caverly Morgan and David Zimmerman on your schedule. So I have some slides to share with you. So as you see and have heard, I am an MBA, which is an unusual attribute for a Dharma teacher. And I thought I'd explain a little bit about why I'm interested in this topic, how I came to it, and a little bit about my take on it. So my family has a history of leadership. My family are immigrants from Sri Lanka and came to the United States just before I was born, and somehow got involved in creating a lot of different kinds of organizations in the community. So I saw leadership enacted in my life through my parents and in our community. And then through my own life, little by little, started engaging also in positional leadership. So I was class president in middle school. Some of you might have done that kind of thing. And I was captain of some sports teams. Later in college, I was leading a peer counseling group and so on. So I learned about being a leader through making mistakes and then trying to get better at it, basically. Along the way, I accidentally found out that leadership was something that could be developed. So after college, my first job was in working as a hotline director. And I stumbled into a leadership and management training through Youth Service America in my 20s and was so amazed that it was possible to learn how to communicate better, how to run a meeting, how to develop priorities. And all of this was incredibly helpful to me. I ended up going to the Yale School of Management for grad school, got an MBA, and was learning about leadership as one of the focuses of my studies. And meanwhile, throughout my time since I was about 19 years old, I was engaged in learning Buddhist meditation just out of personal interest. For a long time, had these two tracks running separately. So I was engaged in Buddhist meditation and learning Dharma for myself, but I was having this other sort of professional, right livelihood kind of track going on. Eventually, I was asked to teach meditation, and I didn't see the connection between these two fields. When I was asked to teach, I was about 27 years old. In our tradition, the teacher has to kind of tap you, an established teacher. And my teacher told me to start a class in meditation and Dharma at my grad school at Yale School of Management. And my initial reaction was like, no, those things don't go together. No one is going to be interested in that. Yeah, that seems like a very bad idea. So I avoided doing that. It took me several more years to bring these two topics together. Side note, as it turns out, she was right and I was wrong. Later, I found out there were actually a lot of people who would have been interested, but I didn't know that. It was not yet the golden age of mindfulness being raised. I ended up doing consulting work with organizations, and particularly ended up doing a lot of work with organizations going through change. So when a leader, particularly a founder, is leaving, how can the organization weather that change? And through that, ended up inadvertently also coaching people. So coaching the leaders, the outgoing leader, so that they could help let go, help them figure out what their next thing was, and then helping the incoming leader also figure out how to engage with the new organization and so on. So through that, I ended up getting training in leadership coaching, again, finding out that that was a thing. And since then, have been coaching people in many different fields. So social justice, people working in tech, film, science, academics, athletics, education. And particularly, how can people bring their path of practice together with their leadership? For a while, again, I kept these things separate. I was doing Dharma teaching and then I was doing the coaching. But essentially, because I have such an unusual name, when people would try to search for me for a Dharma thing, up would come the coaching and MBA stuff. And then when they were looking for me for the MBA and consulting and coaching stuff, up would come the Dharma teaching. So through that, I was kind of forced to integrate, which was a good thing, and found that very helpful and interesting. So now mostly I work with people who are interested in bringing these two fields together rather than seeing them as separate. So not having a separate spiritual life or path of development and work. So let's talk a little bit about leadership. Here you see some geese flying for the winter, perhaps, south. I'm also a birder, so you might see several birding slides in this presentation. You can learn a lot about leadership from nature. So when birds fly in this kind of V formation, it's actually a very aerodynamic and smart way to move. Birds fly thousands of miles in their migration routes. So it's really important for them to be able to do this in the most efficient way possible. This V formation takes advantage of the upward lift generated by the wings of the birds in front of them to reduce wind resistance so that the birds in the back can actually expend less energy while keeping pace. So it's kind of like how cyclists will draft one behind the other on a cycling racing team. So the birds are doing that. Also, interestingly, they take turns being the leader in the front. So the leadership roles will shift within the flock. The bird at the front is doing the hardest work, facing the most air resistance. And eventually it gets tired and it moves to the back and another bird takes its place. So the birds take turns and they actually carefully match the amount of time spent in the front and the back. So leadership, I would say, is in some ways something that we also can share. There's positional leadership in which, of course, one has a purview over a certain area of guiding an organization, a community. This can be through being the program director, the CEO, the president, executive director, mayor, board of supervisors, or it could be in a family, being a parent, being an older sibling, or sometimes also there is situational leadership that arises. So at times when someone needs to take leadership in a particular given arising situation, but it's really quite fluid. For example, I just went to Yosemite National Park area last week. I just came back. And when I was trying to leave, the area that we were in, we couldn't leave because a tree had fallen across the road. And there was a moment in which everyone was trying to figure out, like, how do we get out of here then? Like, what's the thing to do? Should we call someone? Is it possible for us to move this tree ourselves? We're trying to get back for a flight for one of the people in my party. So, a lot of different communications going on in that moment of kind of situational leadership. How do we deal with this here? In general, you could say leadership is bringing forth your unique gifts and talents in service of a positive vision. So through your own efforts and through inspiring and guiding others. And I would say that we all have a capacity for leadership. So both in these kind of situational ways, but also we all have some kind of creative contribution to make in the world. based on our skills, our talents, our passion. And leadership can occur in many different areas: business, politics, social change movements, neighborhoods, communities, playgrounds, all of this. So in case you're listening to this and you don't identify as a leader, I want to suggest to you that you might also be a leader. Another question about leadership that sometimes comes up is, well, are people just born leaders? So some people do seem to naturally have a lot of the characteristics from a young age that enables them to take positions of leadership. And we'll talk a little bit later about what some of these characteristics are. But I would also like to suggest that all of us can develop these characteristics through our life. So sometimes circumstances will support the unintentional growth of these qualities, but it also is possible to intentionally cultivate these qualities that make us great leaders. So second part of the title includes the word mindfulness. So in case someone is not aware about what is mindfulness, so mindfulness is an English translation of a word in Pali, the ancient language that the Buddhist teachings were written down in, called sati. And mindfulness is actually rooted in the Buddhist tradition, even though now it's moved into many different fields, which I feel like can be good. So since about the 1980s, it's moved into Western mainstream and can be learned in schools, in companies, hospitals. It's been studied through National Institute of Health and many other places, scientifically proven to have benefits. Mindfulness is a way of connecting with your work, your life. It's a way of being present with oneself and with others. It's a state of being, not a technique per se, but it can be cultivated and it can be practiced. It's about cultivating attention with a balanced, aware, clear seeing to what's happening right now. It develops an awareness of the body, of emotions, of thoughts. And the instructions in the Buddhist teachings are actually to cultivate mindfulness internally and externally. So we want to pay attention to what's happening in our inner world, but also what's happening in the outer world. So both to other people, in the environment, all of that. Mindfulness is part of an eightfold path of development in the Buddhist tradition, and includes also a connection to ethical conduct, so noticing our impact on others. Hummingbirds, which we have here in North America, are incredible birds who are tiny, tiny birds. I'm sure those of you who are around Northern California would have seen them. They're actually able to fly up, down, backwards. Only birds able to fly backwards. They're able to hover. They eat huge amounts of nectar. Here's seen taking from a flower too. So in case some of you have not done any practice of mindfulness, I thought we'd do a brief practice of being present. And part of the Buddhist philosophy is that that which we call our life is made up of experiences that arise through 6 different sense doors or sense fields. So the 5 that you learned in kindergarten, the sense fields are seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, hearing. And the 6th sense field is the mind. So in our life, there arise different sense experiences of sights, of sounds, of tastes, of sensations of the body, smells, but also different impressions arise in the mind. So these are thoughts, memories, plans, impressions, all of this. Likewise, also there are experiences of emotion that arise both in the body and the mind, you could say. So with mindfulness, we're tuning in to just be present with how things are. So just on the first level, recognizing the way things are as best we can. So I invite you to engage in a brief practice of mindfulness of the body. So can you feel your connection to your chair, your cushion, your bench, however you're sitting? Can you feel the sensations of your butt on that chair? It might be pressure, it might be heat. Can you feel your feet on the ground? Can you notice how it is in your hands right now? They might be touching each other. They might be laying in your lap. So the direct attention to sensations is the practice of mindfulness of the body. Now, there might be thoughts about it. For example, you might feel the base level of sensations, but then you might go to thinking, oh, well, actually, it's kind of hot. Maybe I should open a window. So now that's the field of the mind, thoughts. But just recognizing what's happening in each of these fields, knowing it as it is the first level of practice. Also, as we tune in to each of these fields, we can recognize that everything in these fields of experience is always changing. So there's no sensation that stays for a very long time. So thoughts come and go, sensations of the body come and go, emotions come and go. So tuning into this and recognizing this is also a helpful part of our practice. You can rest your attention in the field of the body also through noticing your breath. And this is a helpful place to develop some calm, develop some centeredness when things are confusing or difficult for you. So you can just notice wherever it's easiest for you to feel yourself breathing. It could be in the breath at the chest or the belly. It could be that you sense the breath in the nostrils. So just take a moment to connect with the sense of this body breathing. Feel like you can close your eyes, just relax. Just feeling the in-breath, feeling the out-breath. Nothing else to do, nowhere else to go. If thoughts arise, you can just recognize that as thinking, allow them to pass away, and connect again with the sense of the body sitting, body breathing, resting at ease. So you can notice the sound of the bell arose in the field of hearing, and that also came and went. So congratulations, those of you who have never practiced mindfulness before, now you have been initiated. So mindfulness is kind of the star word of our tradition in some ways, or of Buddhist practice, but there's really a lot of different qualities and characteristics related to leadership that can be helpful to us. And some of it is tuning in to all of the senses, being able to recognize things that you might not pay attention to if you are purely stuck in the field of thought and of the mind. So the field of thought and the mind is not your enemy or is not a problem, but we can get other information from tuning in also to the field of the body, from practices being listening, mindful listening. This slide shows a boat called the Hokulea, which is a very inspiring story about the reemergence of Polynesian navigation over the last 50 years. So one of the places that I go and teach is in Hawaii, and I love going there. It was very good for my genetic material, which comes from tropical climates. But among the beautiful things there is the reemergence of the Hawaiian culture, like more people learning Hawaiian language and a pride in the culture. So at some point there was this question of how did people get to these Hawaiian islands and all the Polynesian islands? And there was one theory that was people floated there just happenstance on rafts. And one anthropologist European anthropologist did some kind of experiment where he floated over from somewhere. But the people of Polynesia said, no, we come from a people that have tradition of very sophisticated navigation. So we're actually able to intentionally navigate to different islands. And many people were skeptical about this and thought, well, how could you do that without any modern instruments? But there was a group of people who wanted to prove that this was possible. So they actually built as models of these ancient double-hulled canoes. And they found one of the last navigators who knew about this ancient art on one of the Polynesian islands and got him to teach young Hawaiians and Polynesian people about it. And basically, they revived this ancient art of navigation. And now these boats go around all over Polynesia, actually around the world, sharing this knowledge. And beautiful stories. The first time that these boats came into Tahiti from Hawaii, that it was so moving that all of the people there who came to see the boat just moved into the water to meet the boat in person. Now, the navigators stay up in the boats. So they don't have modern technological kind of instruments, but they learn to understand where they are by paying attention to the wind, to the stars, to the currents of the water, by observing the birds that might be flying or the fish that are around, by tuning into the humidity, by tuning into the clouds. And they go into a state of kind of being awake and kind of asleep. There's a sort of state of collectedness, concentration. In Buddhism, the word is like samadhi, in tuning into all of these and then being able to understand where the next island is that they're trying to get to. And sometimes they talk about pulling the island out of the sea in this way. So as leaders, even if you are not doing something physical like this, there's something akin to this that we can learn to do. And the training for this includes being able to tune in to intuition, tune into our senses, get some way of developing senses that we usually don't pay attention to. So for any leadership journey, there's usually some goal that you're aiming for. And the question is, how do you navigate there? So the engagement in mindfulness and cultivating these other aspects of practice can be very beneficial. So a little bit more about leadership. We all have had experiences of leadership through our life. So starting as children in your family, you've had some experience of leadership at school, on clubs and trips, on sports teams, of course, in the public arena, in terms of the leaders of your city, state, religious leaders, federal leaders. So I want to ask you to reflect for a moment about powerful leaders that you have known. So what are characteristics of powerful leaders? You can cast your mind back and think about any leaders you might have had, either situational leadership or positional leadership. It could be at a job that you had. And what were some of the characteristics of those leaders that made them good leaders? So I want to invite you to put in the chat some characteristics of good leaders who you have known. And I'll read them out in case people can't see them. So calm, active listeners, another one for good listeners, compassionate, transparent, flexible, visionary, grounded, respectful of diverse perspectives, build trust, good listening skills, not reactive, action-oriented, encouraging, able to connect with the team. Yeah, great. Thank you. So yeah, many studies of leadership have shown exactly what you're describing here. People want leaders who are honest. People want leaders who are competent, can actually do the work. People want leaders who are inspiring, who have some kind of vision, and who can connect with a team. So here we have some bees. Again, there's a lot of aspects of nature that we can learn from. And bees actually do have a function. They're actually trying to do something. They have a community in which the roles are very specifically prescribed, which is interesting. So there's the queen bee, who's responsible for laying eggs. There are drone bees who are responsible for mating, and then there are worker bees who are kind of hustling, pollinating flowers, keeping the hive safe, and taking care of the queen. And the bees are very good at communicating also. So they have different ways to pass around information. So some by odor, uh, they can help them figure out when to mate and when not to. They can alert the hive to intruders. They also have some elaborate waggle dance that they do, in which they can indicate to each other where to find food. So bees have this actually remarkably sophisticated sense of community and communication. They also, interestingly, keep their hives very clean, so they're very streamlined. So if there's any waste, it gets removed. So dead larvae, waste material, debris, and yeah, some people who have studied bees have said it's one of the most sterile and cleanest natural environments you can find, which is interesting. So communication, key. Understanding roles and performing a role can also be helpful in this way. And then the streamlining, so letting go of things that you don't need to do, getting rid of excess waste, also very helpful. So sometimes people can think about leadership as a sort of individual matter. And it might sound like in some of the ways that we can talk about the characteristics of being a good leader, it's about an individual doing something. But really, there's a lot about teams involved in getting anything done. Rarely does one person just do something on their own. So this is a picture of one of my favorite events in San Francisco, which is the Leap Sandcastle Classic. It's actually happening this year on Sunday in San Francisco at Ocean Beach. So this is a fundraiser for an arts organization that will support arts in the elementary schools. And basically it's a team sort of competition in which architecture design firms pair and partner with elementary school classes to create these giant sand sculptures according to a theme. So I've gone for many years, and sometimes the theme is like around the world. Sometimes it's about animals, this and that. So they spend some time designing their sand castle or sand sculpture they're going to make. And then on the day of, they have a certain amount of time to manifest this. And you can see that the kids who are more kind of like vigorous, they have them kind of like digging these ditches and doing hard work and moving buckets of water. And then other kids who are more like patient are doing these tiny little detailed work of carving things in the sand. And it's really sweet to see all of this then eventually come together as these kinds of beautiful sand sculptures. So yeah, this is something where it's helpful for us to understand as leaders the roles and then also be able to communicate with people the vision and inspire people. Of course, there's many challenges of leadership. So we live in a world with increasing rates of change and uncertainty, huge amounts. Many leaders feel burdened by overstimulation, especially in a world where there's so much tech that can be our friend, but also that can be a challenge and lead to a lot of distraction. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world. There always has been, but sometimes it becomes more apparent now. A lot of people feel burned out. These are all characteristics of the context in which we're trying to be leaders. So leaders have a lot put upon them, expected to be strategic, to have empathy, to be innovative, to be resilient. Even just reading the news these days is a dizzying experience, whatever field you're in. So there's challenges in making good decisions, in being creative, in connecting to people around you, in choosing what to do and not to do, maintaining balance in the face of difficulty, responding rather than reacting, maintaining an inspiring outlook, and also ethical conduct. So you see this in the world around you. Recently in San Francisco this week, actually, there was some challenge of thinking that the National Guard, some federalized troops, and ICE were going to come to the city, and the leadership of the city and community groups also were trying to organize to prevent bad things from happening to people in our communities. San Francisco is a sanctuary city, and like many issues in our current world, the issue of immigration is a complex one. And the truth is that in our society in the United States, there are a lot of people who may be undocumented who actually serve important roles. And the immigration systems have not caught up with this. There are people who are doing important functions in a whole variety of fields. So there was a narrowly averted conflict in the city of San Francisco, which is going on in many other cities recently. Other examples of challenges of leadership. So I became recently a fan of the WNBA because we just got a team in San Francisco, the Golden State Valkyries, a women's basketball, pro basketball team for the first time. And at the moment, there is a negotiation going on between the Players Association, and the leadership of the NBA and WNBA. Their contracts are ending, and the players are trying to negotiate for better salaries and for larger teams because a lot of people are being injured in play. The schedule has gotten longer and more people are getting injured. Also, the pay that people are getting in the WNBA is much, much lower than in most other professional leagues. So in the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, the players share 50% of the revenue from the sports league. But in the WNBA, it's more like only 7% is being shared. So, for example, the top rookie last year made $75,000, Caitlin Clark, as her salary, which is outrageous compared to the top NBA rookie who made millions and millions of dollars. So in these negotiations, recently it's been coming to a head, and one of the players, Nafisa Collier, decided to take an opportunity in her sort of exit interview to call out the leadership for statements they had made, things they had said. Usually if you call out the leadership and if you criticize the refereeing and so on, you'll get fined. But she decided to take a stand. And it's catalyzed a movement from the players and fans to articulate that the players should be paid what they are owed. There's been a editorial in the New York Times, you might have seen about this, and so on. So challenges of leadership, it's not clear what to do at different points. Things are not simple. So I put this in here for you all from Stanford. You might recognize this from your campus. So this is the Hoover Institute, I believe. And I recently learned more about Herbert Hoover. I was not a big student of US history, I have to say, in high school or middle school. I did not pay that much attention, I will admit. It felt very removed. But now, later in life, I'm actually very interested and have been learning more. And all that I knew about Herbert Hoover was basically from a song from the musical Annie, in which Herbert Hoover was being criticized in a sarcastic way for all that he had done to make people living in poverty, Great Depression, how uncompassionate he was when people lost their jobs and were going hungry, and so on. So, my impression of him was that he was not a very good president. He must have been a terrible leader. And it's true that he didn't do well in his presidency, but I was surprised to find out that he actually had a very interesting past in which he had a lot of success in leadership. So apparently Hoover was an orphan. He worked in his uncle's store. And then when Stanford University was being founded, there was some recruiters going around to find students. And somehow they came to him, who was kind of self-educated, and found that he was a bright young man and invited him to go to Stanford. So I believe he was in the first class at Stanford in like 1890 something. So he studied geology. He ended up getting married to the only woman at Stanford, the first female there, Lou, who also studied geology. They joined some mining companies and then created a consultancy that had offices on 6 continents. He ended up becoming wealthy, but then he took a turn actually from that leadership in the corporate world to helping with aid after World War I. So he got involved in food relief, and he was actually very successful at managing food to prevent hunger in Europe after World War I. So based on that, he was appointed by President Wilson to the Food Administration and then later to the Commerce Department under Coolidge and Harding. And he was actually successful in all those roles. But when he was elected president, and everyone was trying to get him to be president in both parties, he was elected successfully. But soon after, the stock market crashed in 1929, and he was not able to meet that moment. He underestimated the suffering of people. He was not able to communicate well with them, nor to make the federal government help. And he was beaten soundly by FDR, who went on to have almost 4 terms in office. And FDR was one of the most successful presidents. During his 31-year-old post-presidency, Hoover apparently became more and more bitter and spent a lot of time criticizing FDR, and also became more and more conservative. And I understand the Hoover Institute is not actually a conservative think tank. So sometimes one is not able to meet the challenges of leadership in one arena, despite having met them well in another. So how can we do that? So here it's possible to actually engage consciously in a process of leadership development. So it's possible to cultivate the qualities that support leadership. It's possible to cultivate our attention through developing focus, not being as distracted, by developing clarity about what is actually going on in this situation. We can increase our awareness. We can develop greater emotional intelligence and insight and compassion. We can become more intentional about our values and our purpose. So we can develop all of these using spiritual technologies for the benefit of ourselves and for whatever positive thing it is that we want to see in the world. We can learn to slow down, to see more clearly. We can learn to observe things with mindfulness and then have a better sense of what's happening. So to see through our ideas of what is in front of us and to see clearly what's actually happening. We also can learn to see others more clearly. So to see past some ideas we have of who different people are. So in that way, we're able to meet the moment and to actually invite people in to the tasks and the projects that we're doing. You know, that whole story with Herbert Hoover, one of the interesting and sad aspects of all that is at the time, of course, his wife, Lou, was not invited into leadership. You know, she was his partner and clearly as educated and smart as him. But as one of my friends said, wasted human capital at that time. Women were not allowed to take these kinds of leadership roles in some official capacity. So what are we missing about people in front of us? What is possible? So it's helpful to recognize that the path of leadership development, of continuing to learn and grow for all of us, no matter what stage we are as a leader, is possible. And it's a pretty individualized thing, I would say. Now, I've been involved in many kind of leadership development initiatives, and there's some things that can be done together, but it's also really helpful for people, even if they're together, to have a kind of cohort model in which they're able to work on the capacities that are most relevant for them in this moment, but also share that with others. So be part of a learning journey with each other too. So one of the lessons of leadership also is recognizing that we are stronger together. And as we tune in with mindfulness to the world, we can recognize that there's actually this deep interconnection of everything. So that which seems to be separate is actually an illusion. We are all connected through the breath that we take, through the world that we share, through the environment. This is a picture of a giant sequoia roots. So giant sequoias are the largest trees on Earth. They grow to a height of 160 to 280 feet, and the trunk diameters are 20 to 26 feet. I just saw some of these in Yosemite. There's a grove, Wawona Grove, that has some beautiful trees. The oldest known tree of these giant sequoias is over 3,000 years old. Now, interestingly, even these huge trees have actually very shallow root systems. So the root systems only extend 6 to 12 feet deep, but the root systems spread very wide. So the root systems go 6 to 12 feet deep, but 200 to 300 feet in each direction. So this supports their massive size and helps them to withstand environmental challenges by intertwining with the roots of neighboring trees for stability and nutrient sharing. So it's really helpful to recognize this for us and to not get trapped in a sense of leadership that we're doing something alone. We're always part of communities. We're always part of networks of people, and we're always going to be stronger together. So if you're ever feeling alone, it's good to reflect on this and to see the ways in which we're actually working with others and to intentionally engage with that, I would say. There's this mythology of the lone leader, the hero's journey. And some of that is true, that we all go through our own process of challenges and meeting them. But when we look a little bit more closely, we can see that we even meet those challenges through the support of others. So here's a quote from the former Senator John McCain. "Nothing in life is more liberating than to fight for a cause larger than yourself, something that encompasses you but is not defined by your existence alone." So for those who are engaged in leadership, it's helpful to have some goal that is larger than yourself. So doing something that is beyond just gain for yourself, but is going to improve your community, is going to bring benefit to others, to the earth, to the planet, to the world. Being able to communicate about that can bring something more energizing and inspiring to yourself and to others. Back to birds. So this picture is a murmuration of starlings. Murmurations of birds are basically flocks of birds. You might have seen them that kind of move and morph in ways through the sky. It's very beautiful and kind of mesmerizing. And for a while it was mystery, like, how are they doing this? Like, what's going on? Like, who's leading this? This is not as clear as the V shape of geese moving. So some studies of this have shown that complex flock behavior can be replicated by individuals following a few different rules that create their patterns of movement. So the birds will tune into the speed and the direction of the birds around them and try and stay close to each other. So the birds seek to match the direction and speed of the nearest 7 or so neighbors, but not all the birds around them. And so each individual is following some rules in a sort of simple way, but it creates a complex kind of pattern. And it could be called a complex adaptive system. So these days in leadership, there are a lot of different things going on in all different fields. And so it's actually helpful not to feel like, oh, as a leader, I need to find a place and build something, plant a flag here and make this be the spot. So actually developing flexibility, developing comfort with not knowing, resting in not knowing is an incredibly helpful practice. And this is something that we can learn through meditation also. Even in sports coaching, there's something going on now, the philosophy of a constraints-led approach, it's called CLA, in which before the idea was like, we teach people to do a certain movement and to repeat that movement over and over, and that would help them to get better at that aspect of sport. But in many sports, it's like a dynamic system. It's not just you hitting a ball against a wall. There's like other players there. So with this constraints-led approach, it's related to this complex adaptive system. It's like teaching players how to adapt and how to engage and how to be creative within systems of play. So this is all very interesting and related to nature. So path of practice, it's possible to see your leadership journey as part of your path of human development or even spiritual development, you could say. So developing characteristics and qualities of patience, of all of the good things that you listed as important characteristics of leadership, ethical conduct, mindful listening, mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of emotion, awareness of thought, understanding which thought train do I want to get on? Where do I want to go in this? Being able to manage conflict. So all of this can be part of our path of practice. And it's possible to develop, to gain insight, to relate to people in more skillful ways, in which then it's good for yourself in your development as a human being, but also good for the work that you're doing. So benefits. It can help you to continue to learn as a leader when you see your path as a path of practice and engage with mindfulness, with development in this way. So many times people will push to get something done, and it's possible to get something done without tuning into those around you, without actually being successful at communicating well. But usually at the end of that process, the leader feels burned out, people are bitter around, don't want to engage more, are not inspired, and there's something very hollow about that. So even though you got something done in that way, the process may have done harm to yourself, to your relationships with others, sometimes to your health. So you can't really move forward as a team, as a group. So I hold a vision of leadership in which it's possible to actually pay attention to how something gets done, but also it's possible to have success in what you're doing. So engaging with this development of positive characteristics of goodwill, of compassion, of focus, all of this can be good for your own path of development as well as helping you to become a good leader. Now, I will say that it's not purely simply like, oh, this is going to be all going in the same direction. Sometimes as people engage in these practices and take a more mindful approach to leadership, among the things that they learn is that they don't actually want to be in this position anymore, or they want to shift to a different field, or there's actually someone better to lead their group or organization at this particular point. So there's a common trend that happens in movements and in organizations is that at different stages of that movement, different people might be better leaders. So in the beginning, there's sort of a startup culture, and it might require someone who has a kind of very inspiring and creative vision and can bring people around and is good at and happy with a lot of uncertainty. Then there might be a period of time in which a different kind of leader is needed, a kind of leader who can actually help to develop systems and structures, and that might be a different kind of person. And then later on, there might be a need for a leader who can actually work within other complex organizations, build partnerships, and so on. So it's really helpful and important for leaders to know when it's time for them to step down. So when they have given what they can to an organization, to a movement, and then when it's time to gracefully shift to a new role. And as I mentioned in my previous work in working with leaders, there's often a tendency of people to kind of stick around because they can't think of what the next thing will be for them, or because they're so invested in the organization, in the area, in that sort of field that they can't let go. So this is not the best thing for that organization, that movement. And knowing when to let go is a really important part of leadership. Knowing when to lead, knowing when to follow, a la the geese flying south. So other benefits include being able to have some resiliency. So resilience within yourself and resilience of your organization or your project. In the Buddhist practice, I mentioned when we were doing our guided practice earlier, that one of the characteristics when you tune in with mindfulness is noticing that everything is always changing. So this is true, and this is important to recognize as a leader. Now, one of the corollaries of that, because everything is always changing, you actually can't rely on any one thing or experience or organization as if it is solid, as if it's going to stay that way forever. So this is true of everything. This is true of political systems, of the weather, of physical buildings, of organizations, everything. So the more we recognize that, and the more we're able to actually live in harmony with that and lead from that place, then the better leader we can be, the less suffering we create for ourselves and others, and the more harmoniousness there can be in our process of leading. Another corollary to this is that because everything is always changing in every area, then things are not as solid as they seem. So that which we think of as permanent, as some entity, is actually much more fluid. So some of the Buddhist terms for this include, emptiness or anatta, the non-self aspect of things. So it's that everything is actually a process rather than an object. And having insight into these aspects of the way things are through mindfulness and then leading from that place is very beneficial. So learning to relate to people from a place of love, a place of care, but also allowing them to be fluid, giving them the opportunity to change, as well as sometimes having to make the hard decisions of when things need to end, when people need to leave, when you need to leave yourself as well. So those of you who know something about Buddhist practice might recognize what I was just talking about as the three characteristics, anicca, anatta, dukkha. So getting more insight into those and learning to live in alignment with them can help you to be a better leader. I am postulating. So also as a leader, you can notice what the motivation is that is driving you. So sometimes as a leader, you might find yourself motivated by fear or by working against something that is coming at you. And usually it's much more engaging and energizing, even if that is part of what you have to meet, to actually have a positive vision of what you are moving towards. And then actually to move towards that in some ways from a spirit of wholesome, more onward leaving, energizing qualities. So generosity, love, even, dare I say, so leading with love, with care. And that vision, positive vision, can be arising, much as I described the Hokulea navigators pulling the island from the horizon. So creating this vision and moving towards a positive vision rather than purely being stuck in a negative area. Some further resources for you. So I have a website, anushkaf.org. Welcome to go there, have some talks, and also a schedule of retreats where I teach Dharma and information about my coaching practice. If you're looking for a book about mindfulness, my favorite rec is Mindfulness in Plain English by Bhante Gunaratana, who is a Sri Lankan monk. It is literally that, Mindfulness in Plain English, very clear book. Insight Meditation Practice Centers. So I teach at many places around the world. The most close place to here is a retreat center called Spirit Rock Meditation Center in Marin that has multi-day retreats and classes. And then close to you at Stanford, there's a place called Insight Meditation Center, Redwood City, that is run by some of my colleagues. That's a very good place. They have a lot of good classes and groups. There's places that you can find Dharma talks and guided practices. So Dharma Seed is one of them, in which you can find recordings and you can look up different kind of Buddhist topics there and listen to Dharma talks and guided meditations, and then audio Dharma also. And then if you want to get in touch with me, I do coaching with leaders who are interested in and or who already have a practice of mindfulness. That's my email there. Maybe I'll pause there and see if there are any questions. And I see that there's a Q&A function. You can tap that, and then I believe Tia is going to read them out to me.
Yes. Thank you, Anushka, for this inspiring framework and exquisitely beautiful slides. I enjoyed that. We have a question about the complex adaptive system and how you referenced the skill that meditation cultivates of developing the capacity to sit with not knowing. Could you just elaborate a little bit more about having that capacity to sit with not knowing within the complex dynamic system and how you see those two to work together?
Yes, great question. So many times we're moving through the world with frameworks that we may or may not see. So we have a kind of like projections in our mind about how things are, what's going to happen. We might not even consciously know that we're doing that. And then we get disappointed when things don't turn out like that. When people surprise us, or when circumstances surprise us, when events surprise us, the weather surprises us, all these different kinds of things. So, how can we develop the ability to meet what's happening as it is and then respond to it without getting too worked up and spending a lot of energy on unnecessary friction of stress, strain, getting knocked around? So, the practice of sitting meditation, the practice of mindfulness in all forms is helpful, but I'll talk about the practice of sitting meditation. In some ways, it's like you're in a lab. So, you're like, for this period of time, 20 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, 1 hour. I'm taking this vow. May I be present with whatever it is that's arising? And let me see what it is that shows up through each of these different sensations or fields of experience. So, can I be with different body sensations? Sometimes when you're sitting, there's the experience of pain. Is it possible to increase the ability to be present with unpleasant body sensations without immediately having to react and move? Different thoughts might come up that could include thoughts that you don't want to see, memories of the past, ideas of what might happen in the future. So, can you be present with thoughts and just notice them for what they are without getting too worked up about them? So, the whole field of recognizing thoughts and being able to see the nature of thought is incredibly helpful for leaders. There's a story in the Zen tradition of someone who goes into a cave and paints a picture of a tiger. And then they go, tiger, and they run out of the cave screaming. So what happened in that case? It's kind of a funny story. It's like, oh, they forgot they made that up. But you could notice that many times you might just be sitting here, something arises in your mind that hasn't actually happened, and you think that it's going to happen. You think that it is happening. There's a whole emotional response, like we're borrowing trouble from the future in some ways. So learning to be fully present and to be like that navigator in the Polynesian navigating canoe, to be steady, to see what's arising. And a lot of that includes being able to be present with not knowing what the next thing that's coming is. And then when that comes, then to be able to meet that with some grace. So you can see leaders who have this. Equanimity is one of the names for this quality of balance. In Pali, the word is upekkha. So a groundedness, a recognition of how things are, not getting knocked around by circumstance, and being able to rest at ease with not knowing. So I told you that story about trying to leave from Yosemite and getting stuck behind this fallen tree. And the friend who I was with actually had a flight. So we're trying to get back to San Francisco for our flight back to the East Coast. And I was very impressed with her. Like she was like, okay, this is how it is. And we went back and, tried to call a few people to tell them there's this fallen tree. It was way too big for us to move it ourselves. And then, yeah, just kind of do what's necessary, change the flight, make some calls, and then go back in a little while to see if it's moved. And eventually it was, and we were able to make our way through. So minus the friction of like, why me? Why now? Why is this happening? Taking things personally. So we practice resting in not knowing when we sit, and everything will come up for you in this time. The internal, the external, uh, physical challenges, mental challenges, emotional challenges, all of that. So it's helpful to practice in this way, and that can help you to be more balanced, and in some ways to be more fluid rather than being more stuck and rigid.
Thank you. That's very clarifying. Another question having to do with ethics and the relationship between the competencies cultivated by mindfulness and then their application to the expression of ethics, and whether ethics are cultivated by mindfulness or whether the cultivation of ethics is a separate path.
Yeah, also interesting question. So in the Eightfold Path articulation of it in Buddhism, there's the different elements of it are kind of preceded by a word, samma, sati, sama, ditti, like this. So it's like right or complete or a whole mindfulness. So it's possible to develop mindfulness in some way that seems to be just like, oh, I'm tasting my tea, I'm able to do that. But if we're actually able to tune in with this right mindfulness, then we're also tuning in this internally and externally to the impact that our actions have on others. So it's a question like, will we naturally recognize ethical conduct if we tune in more? It depends on who you are, I would say. It depends on your psychology. So you can see this even in little kids. Like some of them are naturally kind of more sensitive. And so if they do something wrong and you try and call them on it, like they feel bad about it and so on, right? And others will like double down on that thing. Uh, when we tune in with mindfulness, we can notice like, oh, when we do something that is aggressive or violent, for example, uh, it's like in that moment that we're kidnapped by that state of aggression. And it actually does not feel good to yourself. And obviously, it doesn't feel good to the other. So there is a framework of ethical conduct in the Buddhist teachings. For us as lay people, it includes avoiding killing living beings, avoiding stealing or taking what's not offered, avoiding harm with sexuality, there's a lot of stuff around speech that's a very interesting field for us to pay attention to. So avoiding false speech, harsh abusive speech, slander, gossip, and even unnecessary speech, which leads to actually listening. And then the fifth one is to pay attention to your use of intoxicants, which can cloud the mind and make you do anything in those previous four categories that you might not otherwise want to do. So before we become fully awakened beings and fully aligned with Dhamma, we're going to make mistakes in these areas. If we tune in with mindfulness, we can learn from them. But I would say like it does take some intention and recognition of integrity as being an important part of the path. Because some people you may see can kind of bulldoze and lead and harm people and lead and seem in the short term to have some kind of results. But this is not what we're going for in this kind of framework.
Thank you for illuminating that broader dimension. We have a follow-on question in that realm that asks about your experience of who seeks the training that you're describing of mindfulness and leadership. And the question asks about the context in which some individuals and organizations that have contributed to some of the social and planetary challenges that humanity faces and the planet faces now. Are you seeing any pivot and seeking and hunger for what the participant refers to as conscious leadership from any specific sectors, such as big tech or more perhaps startups? Where are you seeing the seeking?
Yeah, it's interesting. There has been a lot of interest over the last 10, 15 years, I'd say, in bringing mindfulness into business also. Uh, However, sometimes there's been a perspective of mindfulness as sort of a way to make participants and employees more productive, which sometimes it does, but then actually, as I mentioned previously, like sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes actually people might realize and recognize like, oh, I actually don't like doing this thing I'm being asked to do. So, broadly speaking, you could say that's productive and that they recognize the thing they're being asked to do is unethical or harmful or something, but, it might have some surprise results for the leaders. Um, yeah, there's a lot in tech, and I appreciate that in the Bay Area, there's a lot of creativity and innovation. And so there are people who are more interested. And, I think also California being closer to Asia, there's been a lot of contact with Buddhism and Eastern philosophy. There's also a lot of people from Asia, Asian origins who are involved in tech, like from South Asia, East Asia, and so on. So uh, through that, I think there's a willingness to engage. But I've really seen it in a variety of fields. So I have worked with people individually who have been in government, who have been in science, yeah, who have been in the arts, Oscar-winning film directors, and even scientists and education. So mostly it happens that there's an individual who happens to have some kind of interest and then they start to develop, and then they find the benefits for themselves. And then they see like, oh, this could be beneficial also for our company or our organization. I like when I get brought into organizations through the field of leadership as opposed to through the field of wellness, I will say. When it's brought in through the field of wellness, oftentimes it's seen as a lower priority kind of thing. And people are not always given the time to actually participate and so on. But I really appreciate when people are able to engage with these practices and with mindful leadership as something that is seen as beneficial for their own development and also for the whole company like that. So a variety of fields, but yeah, tech is certainly among them. Definitely some social justice oriented organizations, but variety. Yeah, I feel blessed to be in the Bay Area where there's a lot of folks interested.
Thank you. You referenced the recent circumstances in San Francisco and the outcome of averting tensions and preventable violence. Could you shed light on some of the actual processes of who spoke to whom and how the elected leaders and the community organizations communicated with each other to just animate that inspiring example with a little more detail?
Yeah, it's interesting. This is all like this happened just like yesterday, basically. So I don't even know that I have the whole story on it at all. But my understanding of the sequence of events is that one of the tech leaders actually invited Benioff of Salesforce, actually made a public statement that there should be the National Guard brought to San Francisco, which then brought us back into the crosshairs of that whole thing with the president. And so then he said the president was saying, like, I'm going to bring the National Guard to San Francisco. And then all manner of city officials were like, no, 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 this is not a good idea. We do not need you here. We're doing fine. So I think that the mayor both tried to communicate with the federal government and with Trump, as well as basically got a bunch of other tech billionaires to talk to him, is my impression, and including got Benioff to go back on his statements and say, actually, I was wrong. We're fine. We don't need that. So I think eventually it sounds like he was swayed by that kind of advocacy. I think also a lot of community organizations really got on their elected officials. Like, this is not going to be okay. Like, we need to do something about this. So it also was community organizations. But yeah, in some smart way, I think that the mayor figured out, what is going to move the needle on this, like what's going to make this change. And even if we don't like the fact that it was the opinions of billionaires that seem to shift things, that is part of how things seem to operate. So yeah, they got it done anyway at the moment. However, with that kind of sense of like the roots together, that it's not ruled out the National Guard being moved to Oakland, and a lot of the times it seems like it is into cities that have Black mayors, who the federal government is moving these armed troops into. So Bay Area as a whole, we need to stick together and protect each other, protect our friends, our community members. So stay tuned.
Mhm. Using your V formation of the birds versus your dynamic, complex adaptive system, which would you characterize what you just summarized as being?
um, Interesting. Maybe more complex adaptive systems. Although it could be a little bit of both. The community leaders who already were on this. I mean, actually, like Bay Resistance, there are a lot of community organizations that have been organizing around this for a long time. And it requires more than just one person, the mayor or some wealthy person, to do this. So the roots of this go deep, and there have been a lot of trainings and community organizations and sessions for how can we protect each other. But then in the moment of that, like, how do we flip this? I think there was a sense of like, who is going to be the one to be in the front and be able to actually shift things. So there was a little bit of the front goose kind of thing going on too.
And thank you for stepping into that question to show that both of those paradigms that you offered us can work together and sort of be woven in and out of the application when circumstances and situations arise.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. And yeah, I think that's true, in sports also for sure. And I'm a fan of, the Valkyries I mentioned, also the U.S. women's national soccer team. And for the Valkyries, for example, like they did really well this year for a new team. And by the first half of the season, they actually had someone nominated to the All-Star team, which was uh, very surprising. But then that person got injured. So then some new people came up as leaders, and then those people got injured. And, there was some dynamism to players who hadn't previously had an opportunity to be leaders continuing to step up. So I think that happens in teams a lot, or it can happen in successful teams. And I appreciate that.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you for elevating the role of conviction and clear goals and the ability to be dynamic and how the path to achieving them and realizing them can appear. We have several people writing in how fantastic this session was and how helpful everything you provided has been. Thank you very much for bringing your wisdom of experience as an academic and as a Dharma student. We're grateful to you.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for participating.
Mhm.
Great.
Thank you.